Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more, who represent our community all around the world. This month, SG Women Month is proudly presented by Silicon Valley Bank and Google for Startups.
Hey everyone, welcome to Startup Grind Omaha. This is a special Startup Grind because this is Omaha's first event and also the first of many Startup Grind SG Women's Month events. All over the country, all over the world, there are Startup Grind chapters featuring female entrepreneurs, business leaders in whatever their respective spaces are. And it's really exciting because it's a time to get to showcase all of the incredible female talent out there that are starting companies or have started companies, work in VC funds, all sorts of things. If you're interested in more of those, you can find recordings and also the live events if you're still tuning in before the end of May at startupgrind.com. They have a whole page dedicated to the SG Women's Month. And in this event, we're lucky to have with us our very own Amy Johnson, which is from LifeLoop here in Omaha. She's one of the co-founders and really one of the people that has spearheaded this incredible startup that not so long ago was an early stage startup, now is very much well into the growth stage. So we think she has a lot of interesting things to share, and specifically we're going to talk about having a team and how she has kept most of her team with her the entire time and continues to grow, and the insights she has there. I'd like to thank our global partners for Startup Grind Women's Month is Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank. Our local partners are Biso Studio. Biso Studio is a startup studio here in Omaha, Nebraska that works with startups all over the country and also a few in Europe and Canada. They provide software solutions, software development, marketing, business development. They essentially act as a co-founder to help startups realize the vision that they have and do so in a capital efficient way. If you want to learn more about them, go to beso.io. That's beeso.io. And then our second local partner is Event Vesta. Event Vesta is a local startup here in Omaha that is an event startup. They are a place to post events and to find events. They have locations all over the country. Most major markets have an Event Vesta that you can find your local events at. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and they'll have a lot of new features coming up soon. One of the features that we really like to promote is the promoter feature, where if you're an event promoter, you can post once to Event Vesta, pay a small fee, and it will get sent out to all of the local event calendars. And this is available in most of the major markets throughout the U.S. We use it for Startup Grind, and if you're interested in learning more about that, check out eventvesta.com. Again, if you're just joining now, please welcome, say hello in the chat, tell us where you're from. If you're not from Omaha, tell us if you have a startup you're working on or you work in a company, whether it's in the startup ecosystem or you're in an innovation department or you're just interested in startups in general or interested in company culture, which is what we're going to talk a lot about. Let us know in the chat. And with that, let's go ahead and get started, and let's welcome Amy Johnson. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really happy to have you here and obviously excited to have this first event. We'd love to have some events in person soon, but we're not quite there yet. We still have the mask mandate in Omaha, and people are still getting vaccinated. A lot of people are vaccinated now, but soon, hopefully in June. But anyway, thank you, Amy, for being here. I think to start, let's go from like a high level of what LifeLoop is, where you're at now, so that we can get some context as we go and talk about kind of the early building of your team, how you got to where you're at now, and basically you've seen a lot of amazing growth recently, so we'd love to hear about that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm very honored to be part of this, so thanks for inviting me. I'm Amy Johnson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LifeLoop. We are a software company that provides family engagement to senior living communities. We do a lot of operational things for the community, but we started LifeLoop with the goal to connect families to senior living communities. That was the initial problem we were solving. It's changed a lot since then, but really we want to engage residents in their communities and the world around them. And we do that through our operational platform. And we started LifeLoop in 2015. It was my husband and Phil Lee that co-founded the company. And initially we were, trying to solve that problem of connecting families. And we really realized that problem's much larger in the senior living space. And so over the last, it's almost been, 7 years. We formalized in 2015, but we were working on it for a year or so prior. And we've gone through kind of every phase. The roller coaster of the journey of building a company is always an interesting one. So right now, 2020 was, of course, a crazy year for everybody. A terrible year for a lot of the senior living industry. For our company, it really kind of took engagement products like us, including us, from kind of a nice to have to a must have. So we had a lot of growth in 2020 because families couldn't go see their loved ones. Communities were kind of scrambling to incorporate technology because they had to reach all audiences. So 2020, we grew 150% as a company. We've had a lot of growing pains, and we're having another great year this year in terms of growth. So right now, I'd say we're definitely in that scaling phase.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing now. It's obviously even before the pandemic, but it's become so much more prevalent, I guess, because of the pandemic, because people are, in these retirement communities are so isolated. It's one of those industries, just like so many others, that has been so resistant to change for so long, and it's so needed. So there's a lot of opportunity in those industries as well. They might be difficult to get into because of that resistancy. But yeah, it's definitely much needed.
Right. Yeah. And it's been, interesting learning why they're resistant. When anytime you're caring for people, it creates a different problem. And so it's just figuring out how to make it really easy to use and adopt. And those are all things that we've worked really hard at. And they're easy. They look like they're easy to do, but they're actually hard to do.
Yeah. So, and what I'd like to do is go start with where you're at now with your team, so that we can go kind of back and see how you got to where you're at right now.
Yeah. So we have a fantastic team, a very self-aware, smart, accountable people, and we had a lot of growth with our team to accommodate the growth with our clients. So in 2020, we added more than double in terms of people, and that was kind of across the board in all roles. But there's just a lot of people learning. So we'll be at around 25 employees by the end of June, and it's just been a lot of it getting people up to speed, and a lot of just getting people comfortable with their roles is where we're at. But we've gone from half of that last year. I guess we were at the end of 2019, we were probably at 10 people. So it's been, just a lot of change for everybody.
And so the team is a mix of software developers, sales, customer service. I'm sure there's things that I'm missing there.
Our development team, which includes our UX designer and QA roles, and our developers, and then Phil oversees the product team. Phil, who co-founded LifeLoop, and then we have our service side, which was the team that grew the most. As a software as a service company, we do really focus on the quality of customer service, and you can only do that by adding more people to support it. So that was the area that grew the most during 2020. And then we have our sales team as well. And then our marketing team.
So this is a good way to go, I think a good point to go back to the very beginning. When you first started the company, was it just you and Phil from the very beginning?
Yeah, so our co-founding team's kind of a funny one. I always say we're just like three really, I don't know, crazy or dumb people. I'm not probably a little dumb, but my background is sales and marketing. Phil's a lawyer, and my husband, he actually is a commodity trader, and he still is. But we didn't have a technical background and we didn't have a background in senior living. So we were just kind of obsessed with solving a problem. It started as a project. And so the early days were a blast because and it still is a blast, but it was a different kind of fun,
Yeah.
I would say. And that was really us partnering with a development company initially that was figuring out, okay, how do you build products? That was just like fascinating in itself. So we partnered with Avature, which is a local development company initially. And I was the one selling it, implementing it, servicing it. We had one client at the time. So that was us just learning what we did wrong. How do we fix it? How do you make things better? And then adjust and do it over and over and over and over again. And that was Phil. Phil doesn't have a product background. He's self-taught, which has really been fun to watch. And so we were just really learning together with the help of Avature. And then we're a very, sales focused company initially, not having a product background, but we hired the head of sales in 2016. We made a couple mistakes along the way there as well, but those first hires are so critical. And we also started with a contractor. I think one of your other questions was, what mistakes have you made with hiring? And we started before Avature, we tried to do it like with a freelance company, and it wasn't their fault. We had no idea what we were doing. And, that's hard to work with people when you don't have a good direction from them.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, that's a huge issue that people run into with freelancers, is to know how to direct them, or working with a company that has experience managing that or whatever. That's a common problem that an early stage founder that doesn't have a technical background.
We knew we were in over our heads pretty quick. So it was like, okay, we can't do it this way. So adjusting and realizing what you're not good at was pretty important for us early on.
I'm curious as to when transitioning from using a software development company to hiring software development as on your staff. When did that come into play?
So we hired JT was our first lead developer that we hired, and he actually worked at Avature. That was their model at the time, and he started in 2016 as well. So at that point, we had a few early adopters, and we realized, you do the kind of you weigh the balance of paying a dev company versus having somebody committed to the product. And it made sense then. So he came on board in 2016. So it was first, I think Nick came on in March of 2016. JT came on in June. So sales, then development.
Yeah. And so when did you hire for customer service beyond just servicing those customers yourself?
So Megan runs our service team, and she started in 2017.
Okay. Yeah, that was all kind of back to back.
And that was the hardest. Those are the most, all of them are critical hires. And they have to be, very well thought through. But handing over our early clients was, for me personally, like letting go of your children is always hard to do, but she did a fantastic job. So.
How did you decide at that early stage with just those couple of roles, and then beyond that, what roles were most important for you to hire for?
I think it was a combination of you naturally just kind of, if you're, listening to the market and what's going on and just your workload, you're like, okay, if we want to grow as a company, what's the best thing for the company? That was always pretty obvious. Maybe not to me, but the people that I surrounded myself with, it was very clear, like, they're telling me you're overwhelmed or this isn't the best thing for LifeLoop if you keep trying to do everything. So it just happened over time, those early hires, and it was what we needed at that time. And that was just a combination of a lot of factors. You got to continue to grow. I do a lot of sales. And so you can't sell and service, and it's just not, realistic.
Yeah, right. Did you have, I guess, especially in that early stage, advisors that were other business people that were helping kind of give you advice and guide you?
So we have a very small board. We raised a little money early on, but our board consists of Chuck Norris from Nelnet, a guy by the name of Kobe Ben Simon, who has built his own company in the apartment space. So he had gone through it. So we leaned on those two a lot. And then Kent, Phil, and I. But my father-in-law had built his own business. So just calling people that you're close to and reaching out. I think advice is always so great. It's just such a personal thing, what makes sense, and
Yeah.
it's great to take it all in, but it ultimately has to feel right with yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like what we were talking about before we got on this call. We were talking about how things like this can be so important because it gives people access to stories and kind of inspiration that they might not otherwise have access to. But at the end of the day, it's like everybody's situation is so unique. Finding that board of advisors, I think a lot of early stage startups kind of overlook that. And it's really, really important to build that out. And not everyone has that naturally in their network, but that is such an essential part of building your company and making it successful, to be able to learn from that and have people look at your unique situation. Exactly.
Yeah, totally. It's like having a kid. Everybody wants to give you parenting advice, and it's great. But it's your kid, and you know them best. And I would say it's been very similar to growing a company. It's always hard to let things go like a child, but once you do, it's the best thing for the company. Just giving up things, delegating more, just helps growth.
Have all of your hires been local or have been up until recently, or any remote?
They are. I mean, Nick lives in Chicago, but he's back often, and he's actually from Omaha originally. But yes, yep, they've all been based out of Omaha.
Is there any like we see LinkedIn and Toast base their second offices here, and we see a lot of companies do that, and clearly people see something in the workforce in Omaha and Nebraska in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't know any different. I grew up around here,
Yeah,
so it wasn't really a question of where we'd build a company. It's just what we know. But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely work ethic. I think, humble, kind of heads down, figure it out. People are excited to be a part of something here, and really affect change, which I've seen. Yeah, those are what I see. But again, I didn't really ever think about not doing it in Omaha.
Yeah, I mean, and when you were first starting out, the conversation around remote work was not remotely what it is today. If you were starting out now, would you still not consider remote work and really just focus on the local workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even now with half of our companies still remote, which I think every employer is just kind of at a weird phase right now about what do we do moving forward. But there's still such value in building a team and having conversations in person. And we've started to have a lot more of them, and it made me realize how much I miss it. And there's just a lot that happens in those unintentional conversations, especially with young companies that are just getting going, or just where we're at too. It's like, oh, I don't know, how should we do this? And let's go sit in a room and put it on a board and talk through it. There's so much value in that. So it's one of those things that I'd never considered hiring a fully remote team, and I still don't think I will.
Have you, I guess a lot of companies that are local, or even, I mean, anywhere really, but especially these smaller cities, have a lot of issues hiring locally just because the workforce is so competitive. There's the whole brain drain thing. Have you had any issues with that at all?
It's all about, and maybe we will, we're just getting to that point where we might need to hire quicker. And we've always had the luxury of kind of hiring as we found the right person. And so that might change, but so far it's been very much just taking our time, finding the right talent, and it's definitely out there. It's just figuring out where to look. I don't have the answer exactly of where to look. We're actually talking a lot about that right now. Is how do you find people that think different and can take you to that next level? So we might start kind of running up against that, but so far there's been plenty of solid, fantastic talent.
So let's go back to when you were first building the team. Were those people that you were hiring for that early team people you already met, or were those people that you were going out and posting jobs and either looking for or just posting a job and seeing what came?
The early hires have all been, I wouldn't say people I necessarily knew, but people that worked at LifeLoop knew somebody that knew them. Omaha is the big small town.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of that. It's if you have solid talent and they recommend somebody, they're putting their name to that person and they're a high performer. It's likely that whoever they would refer would be a high performer as well. And so that's how our early team has been built, I would say. There's been a few that are, we post jobs and get resumes, and we've definitely hired a couple that weren't from that network, but that is a lot of how recruiting works.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, so as you've gone along, have you had any issues retaining talent that you've hired, or have you been lucky, or maybe there's something you figured out that has allowed you to retain that talent or keep that talent on board?
I don't know maybe we're just getting lucky. I mean, we put a lot of work into building culture, but we have not had anybody leave on their own in 7 years. So
Wow.
Nobody's left to go get another job. So that is something we're very proud of. We've, made a couple wrong decisions that didn't work out, which are always hard, but also that wasn't because of that person. It's also you have to hire for the right thing. And sometimes we get it wrong, but so far we haven't had anybody leave because they went to another company.
You say you put a lot of work into the culture. What does that look like?
Because culture is such a buzzword for me.
Yeah.
The way I look at culture is just it's really based on trust. It's based on, do people trust us as leaders? Do we trust them? And do they trust each other? And so that's really hard to quantify. It's definitely more of a feeling than it is a thing that you can just reproduce. It requires constant, nurturing, I would say. Culture does. It's all about, how's everybody doing? Why did they start working at LifeLoop? Are we serving them? Our role as leaders at LifeLoop, I always tell, kind of that manager level is to make everybody else successful that's around them. It's not about you. And so that there's no exact way we're doing that other than constantly communicating with each other at the leadership level, but it's just checking in on people, especially during this crazy time.
Right. Yeah.
Are people happy? And happiness is different for everybody. So it's understanding what that definition is for them. And that's hard to do when you grow, but I can confidently say I check in on all of my employees weekly, and I make a list and just how's your week going? Whether it's just a quick chat or send them a note, get a pulse on how everybody's doing. And everybody's not always well. It's
right.
So then that requires work too. What's going on? How can I help you? Have you thought about this? So it's really based on trust, I would say.
Yeah. I think you touched on a few things there that may seem to you like common sense, but I think there's lots of people that struggle with it, and it's things that make a good leader, and that is kind of that service mentality where you and your management team are there to serve the employees which then are in turn are there to serve the customers. And I think that creates an environment that makes people want to stay, and it also helps with attracting talent as well.
Absolutely.
So,
And it's hard, it's culture is something you revisit constantly.
yeah.
And that's what I think is always kind of a miss. Like people don't realize that it's not like it's like software. You build it, then you maintain it, then you fix it, and you do it over and over and over and over again. And that's what we are doing every single week or every day.
Yeah. Right. That's true for software, marketing, sales, customer service, whatever. It takes a lot of constant work.
Yeah, you don't just like set it and leave it. It requires a lot of attention, and people are not, they're complicated, and so everybody's got a different reason for what they're trying to accomplish, a different reason for what they're passionate about, and understanding that at a pretty personal level, no matter how big you get, is very important.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're trying to do as you grow to make sure that you are keeping those things in place and that kind of culture in place as you're not able to do those check-ins by yourself, but maybe your management team has to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm already to the point where I can't always do it. So, I
Right.
think we've naturally built a team that also operates that way. So, making sure the other leaders at LifeLoop do that as well. And then just putting more processes in place around it too is just, important. And that's a whole nother conversation, but that's a big part of where we're at, is just visiting, like, how do we put these processes in place? How do we make sure that we have the right checkpoints, and it doesn't not just in my head or in somebody else's head. So
Yeah. Every startup gets to that point where it's, when you're starting out, it may be more of a creative process of iterating and just trying stuff. But at some point, that stuff needs to be documented and there needs to be process. And it's challenging to shift if you're the entrepreneur that is kind of creative and on the fly, to shift to kind of the process side. Obviously, hiring people that can do that a little better than you is great, but that is a challenging thing for a lot of startups, any company to transition to. But it's really an important part of making sure that success can continue as you
absolutely,
grow.
yep. And a lot of it's on the fly right now. So it's like trying to figure that all out and do it right quickly.
Yeah, it's like putting the ship together while you're already at sea.
Oh yes, that is very true. That's the fun part though. And you're not always going to get it right. You're going to,
Yep.
You're going to miss it sometimes, but then you just have to adjust pretty quick. That's the key.
So as you're starting to scale, or as you're moving further into scale, is there anything that, kind of those problems you anticipate you might run into? Are there any things that you're putting in place to kind of try to just make sure that, things stay stable or continue to the culture, and also being able to continue to recruit people stays?
A big thing for us is so like HR, right? It's like,
Yeah.
initially it's like, oh, I just hired somebody for billing and accounting, and HR is like, an HR person should not do all those HR functions, of course. So we're just to the point where we're like, okay, we need to hire a recruiter and have somebody focus specifically on that. Those kind of things are very important. We did just implement like the Gallup Strengths Finder, not necessarily in the recruiting process, but after people are hired, to really focus. It's one part of the puzzle. But it's important for us as leaders to understand just what are people's strengths, just and talk through that. We just every quarter we'll revisit more team building, and that could be across the company or across just their team. Those sort of things are really things that we're focused on. And I don't know, I mean, I don't have exactly what it'll look like yet, but it's important that we continue to foster that environment of trust and openness. And it's okay to, like, you're not supposed to be good at everything. I prefer that you're not, it's very much continuing to figure out what people's strengths are, making sure they're in the right role. And if they're not, get them in the right role based on those strengths. And that's all kind of a learning experience.
Yeah, some of the best organizations that I've worked for going through my career are organizations that use some kind of assessment like that, whether it's the the Clifton Strength Finders, Gallup Strength Finders, or the DISC assessment. It doesn't really necessarily matter which of those. There's kind of pros and cons to all of them. But it helps the employees work together, because if they know each other's profiles and know each other's strengths and kind of understand how to use that, because it helps them understand kind of each other's strengths and weaknesses and where they can help each other. And then also it helps, leadership make sure that you're putting people in the right positions so that you're taking advantage of their strengths. And sometimes it's really great to put two employees together that complement each other. One, their strengths help the other one's weaknesses and that sort of thing. And also then from the leadership perspective of understanding your own self and having that self-awareness.
The other reason I love to do whether it's Strengths Finder, I know there's a lot out there. That was just the one that I'm most familiar with, and it's local. I mean, it seems to be a very way to do it, but it creates us, like, our number one core value is self-awareness. And if you're not self-aware, it's hard for you to focus on what you're good at, or maybe what you're not so good at. And it's okay to admit you're not good at it. Like, we're not supposed to be good at everything. And so that self-awareness is so important to growing the right team. And I think it's a quality that is very genuine when you can say, that is me. That's great. Now, how do I make myself get better with that, and really focus on that moving forward? So that's a big component of what we do and what we focus at LifeLoop.
Yeah, I love that. I think, from the self-awareness aspect, that's amazing. And then also you add on top of that, just the general effort that you're building there in the culture. And, the fact that you haven't had anyone leave in 7 years is definitely saying something. Not a lot of companies can say that. I think that's definitely something special that, says a lot.
I know. I didn't really realize that until recently, and I was thinking about it. I was like, that's pretty cool. So I'm sure that'll change. I mean, I want everybody to grow and, do what they want in life. And so, and I genuinely mean that. So if that means not at LifeLoop, that'll make me sad, but it's also part of them growing, part of people growing. And I think that's what everybody should strive for.
Yeah. If anyone in the chat, as we finish up these questions, if anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask, I see a couple in there already. Please use the Q&A or just the chat, and we'll get to those pretty shortly. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So where you're at now, and you're more in an established place, and you're seeing a lot of growth, is there anything that Omaha and the startup community in Omaha can do, either to support you or just kind of things that you see in the community that you'd like to see addressed that you think that we can do better at focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like I did say, we haven't had like a hard time recruiting people, but like I mentioned, I think there's value in recruiting people just in your small network, but there's also a downside of that. And so that is something we're trying to really think about. Like, how do we keep fishing from the same pond because we don't know any different? And how do you recruit differently and better? And so getting the word out that, that companies like us are hiring, and like, what is the best avenue, and how do we create a more diverse team, and figure out, how we can add value there. I think that's important. So we are recruiting for a developer right now, a QA right now, and then our customer service team's always growing. So if anybody knows anybody, send them my way.
Do you have those roles listed anywhere?
I do. They're on our website. We just launched our careers page.
Oh, cool.
So that I can put in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I can do that for sure.
Yeah, I think, when people look at a company that maybe doesn't have a very diverse team, we talk about racially or, different identities, it can seem from the outside like that's, done on purpose or there's some malicious intent there. I think that a lot of people understand that that's not the case, but it's hard. It's really hard to reach outside of your own circle. And a lot of times it just is by the nature of the world that your own circle looks and thinks a lot like you. And especially when you're first starting a company, and there's a lot of risk that goes along with taking a job at an early company, it's hard to reach out outside of that circle and get someone to take a risk on you and for you to take a risk on them when you have no idea, how to even reach those people and get a hold of them in the first place, much less integrate them into your team.
And
Yeah,
we
it
will-
does. And it requires networking in different groups. Like one of my lead developers, he actually did just move to Colorado, which is great. That's what he wanted to do. I'm excited for him, but I'm like, you got to go network. You got to get out. You got to go find other talent. So, which is not always everybody's comfort zone or strength.
Yeah.
I think that's hard, but it's also very important and building a team. And so I'm kind of by nature just a networker, but I am trying to get the other. We don't want a bunch of me running around because that would probably be exhausting. So we want, other folks to be doing that networking and figuring that out. So that's all stuff we're trying to navigate. And I'm sure a lot of people.
Yeah, so we have quite a few questions here. So let me start off with the first one here is Jessica asks, what is the most valuable exercise you went through to identify product market fit? So I'm assuming we're talking pretty early on here.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I went and launched into a community in Bettendorf, Iowa, with our our MVP product, and we had the staff view, the resident view, and the family view. And I went and I launched all of them at once. I was so excited. And it was terrible. And that was because I was, it was so logical thinking back on it now, but we have to get our staff to really adopt the product before we launch to family or residents. And I was trying to do it all at once. And it was exhausting to do that. And we still don't do it that way 7 years later. So it's getting your hands dirty and really sitting in that customer's shoes and feeling what they feel and spending time. So I'd say the customer empathy side of things was pretty important early on and really digging in.
When you first launched, you were in a unique situation because you already had a customer before you had even built anything.
Yeah, that was true too.
You were building a product for a customer. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of startups make. They build something and then try to find the customers for it rather than trying to, the best way, the way that I've seen the most successful startups come out of is startups that have a customer already. I mean, it's so much validation, A, because you can focus on your product development around that customer's needs, and then you can scale that out to new customers. And B, as far as an investor goes or something, that there's a paying customer ready.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that we've done really well is we're not obsessed with being right ever. We always assume we're wrong and our customers right. And this way, when we built our early product, that's how we built it. We don't really have anybody that is no, this is how this feature has to be built, because we don't know. And if you go into a community and you're that frontline worker, you go do that for a day and you realize real quick, this is why this won't work. So I always encourage, now it's been hard the last year, but encourage our team to get into the community and go spend an hour with somebody doing the job, and you'll realize yes, our product's important, and yes, it can be so effective in creating efficiencies, but they're taking care of people. It's a very, very small part of their world, right?
Right, yeah.
So, understanding that and realizing the little things make a huge impact, and spending time with those users, customer empathy, I'd say, is what you got to do early on.
Yeah. I hear a lot of empathy coming from you, both on the customer side and the product side, but also on the employee side. So it's, I think really valuable to have that empathy coming from both directions.
Yeah. The employees come first because they're taking care of the clients. That's always my philosophy there. My clients are amazing and so important, but if my employees aren't happy, then my clients aren't going to be happy, because they're the ones taking care of them now, which it was hard for me, but now, again, back
Yeah.
to trust. I have a team of people I trust so much to do that. And that trust takes time and work and relationship building, but I trust my team so much that, and that, when you hire people, it doesn't happen automatically. It's like for them or us.
Yeah.
It takes time.
It takes time to build that trust. Yeah. I think something too that you touched on there is important because it goes both ways. You're not just expecting the team to trust you, and even vice versa, but basically everyone has to trust each other, including teammates to teammates. And it gives people the responsibility to, really feel like they're trusted to do their jobs and own that responsibility and that part of it.
And a big thing I think we've done, like everybody, not just me, but the whole team, like it's all about trying things, and they're not always going to work. And so an environment where you can mess up, it's not even messing up. It's just like, oh, that didn't work, or that was a mistake, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah, right.
it's going to happen. It's life.
We have another question here from Taylor. As you grow your organization and hire more talent, do you struggle to pull talent from more established organizations? So I think, are you, if you're pulling from a Kiewit or a Mutual of Omaha or some big organization, is it a challenge to get them to take the risk to come work for a startup?
I think when you do it very intentionally, you can definitely find it. And it's really understanding what's driving somebody. An established organization might not have the potential to grow, or, maybe they want more flexibility. So I'm trying to think, I'm going through our employees in my head of like which ones have come through established organizations. And I think they all kind of found us because they wanted to leave established, like that wasn't where they were thriving anymore. So I think it's just understanding what somebody's personal goals are. If it's to, make the most money and, I don't know, lead a huge team, that might not be a good fit for a smaller company. But if it's like to have purpose, and it's really just understanding that at a very personal level, when you're recruiting or networking, is okay, well, why would they want to come to LifeLoop? Like, what value can I provide them? I'm very obsessed too with, in my prior life, I was a recruiter at Mutual of Omaha. And I saw firsthand pretty quickly, like if you don't give somebody a realistic preview of what they're walking into, it's not going to go well. So I do it to the Mac. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, like everybody thinks this is like a cool, hip, fun startup, and that's great. We do all of those things, but we also work really hard. And it's, there's this like, you want to make sure that it's both ways, that they understand what they're walking into, and you are comfortable with somebody leaving. I always do that because I always tell them I have to sleep good at night too. Like if I recruit you and get you to leave this job, I want to make sure you're going to be happy, and my job is to tell you kind of what you're walking into. So anytime you join a company that is, not Mutual of Omaha or a gigantic, Fortune 500 company, it's got to be part of the employees' makeup to take on a little bit of risk as well.
Yeah, there's the risk profile, and there's also kind of the desire to work towards something that you can see the impact of. Not necessarily that a big organization doesn't make an impact, but sometimes it's easier to see your individual contribution to those impacts at a startup, and the opportunity for growth that a startup is kind of unrivaled compared to other organizations.
I answered that question, but I think, yes, you can definitely recruit people from more established organizations if the reasons they're leaving meet your culture and your goals.
Okay, so this question is sort of along the lines of some things you've already answered, but I think that you can dig into it a little deeper. What are the major qualities you look for in a new hire, and how do you fit those? How do you look to fit those in new hires into your culture?
Yeah, it's hard. I would say I said self-awareness is the number one, and you can get a feel for that just talking through, just having a conversation with somebody if they're aware of, what they're good at, and really that. I'm not so worried about it's. You also have to be aware of your weaknesses, but it's just really focusing in on what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
In problem solving, that's a harder one to kind of identify, but it's those two things are pretty critical. And I would say early on, extremely critical
Yeah.
because, I didn't have time to teach anybody what to do. Now we have a little bit more training and stuff like that, but you have to be able to think on your feet and problem solve quickly and dig in. Those are things that, anytime you don't have to tell somebody how to do something exactly is key.
So how do you, when you're in the hiring process, is there any ways that you kind of can assess someone's ability for, or their penchant towards problem solving and those things that you mentioned? I imagine those are kind of hard to figure out in the hiring process. Is there anything that you figured out over this time that has helped with that?
Just kind of walking through the scenario. I do like a lot of scenario discussions. Like, tell me about a time when you were in a situation that maybe you didn't know what to do. How did you handle it? And try to get a specific example out of them is always helpful. And then just having other people talk to them too and focus in on, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Let me know what you come out of, and getting different perspectives on that is really important. Sadly and not sadly, I guess, but our early hires, we took a long time to pull the trigger on some because it's hard and right. And there's no way to know. Somebody asked me the other day, how do you tell when somebody's smart? I'm like, I don't know. You don't. You go off of your gut. You go off of all the data you can take in with their work history and the interview, and you decide if it's the right move or not.
Yeah, that's a tough question in general. Like, what is smart even? It's so situational.
No, it was one of those, like, nobody knows.
If you could, so here's another question. If you could go back, would you still choose Omaha as a city to start your company in, or would you consider other cities?
No, for sure. Omaha's great. For so many reasons. It's also home, I think if I would have started in another city, I probably wouldn't have had success.
Yeah. There's something to having the connections that you already have in your hometown. And I think that's something kind of a missed opportunity for the longest time when companies were sort of to get funding, were being forced to move to San Francisco or New York or something, because you're forcing these founders to leave the community behind that is where their entire network is, which I guess if you're an investor trying to make someone reliant on you for their connections, then that might work. But if you're, in it to actually build a company, it's beneficial to have people in their home communities.
Yeah, that was we just did one round, I guess. And that was that Rise of the Rest where we won the pitch competition.
And that was kind of the thinking behind Steve Case and his team with the Rise of the Rest, right? Which I think was initially the place that you received funding from.
Yep.
Which, yeah, for people that aren't aware, that's Steve Case and a couple other investors that I don't know if at that time they were involved, but now are. They go on a tour around the country and they have pitch contests, and then they invest in companies all over the country that are outside of the coastal cities or outside of the major cities on the coast.
Yeah, they're doing some great things. And especially like after COVID, a lot of people are moving out of those cities. So it's it's really cool what they do. They're great. They've been great to work with.
Well, thanks again for joining us, and thanks everyone in the chat. If you want to get a hold of Amy, she has left her email there, and there's also the ourlifeloop.com/careers page if you know anyone that is looking for a job, whether they're a software developer, QA tester, or work in customer service. As we've heard here, I think LifeLoop is a great company to work for. We're really honored to have you, Amy, and LifeLoop here in Omaha.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I hope
thank you
has a great weekend.
Stay tuned for more from Startup Grind. We're going to be hosting our first live in-person event in June. It should be sometime around June 17th. We're going to try to do the third Thursday of every month is our goal. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I'm so happy to bring this together, and I'm glad I saw some of you connecting in the chat. We'll hopefully be able to do that even more in person, and we'll do some work to facilitate some more networking between founders. If there's anyone you're interested in seeing speak, no matter who they are, how big they are, how successful their company is, please reach out and let us know. If there's someone you'd like to learn from, we'll do our best to get them up here on stage with us. Thank you again, Amy, for your time, and thank you for all that you're doing for the Omaha community and doing for your company. I think that's one of the best things that you can do is build a strong company that employs people and gives good jobs to the community. So thanks so much. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your days.
Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more, who represent our community all around the world. This month, SG Women Month is proudly presented by Silicon Valley Bank and Google for Startups.